Hi, everyone. Today I am thrilled to say I'm joined by the lovely Jack Kavanagh, who I had the pleasure to meet virtually a few weeks ago. And I thought, as you know, I've done several interviews over the last few months, and I wanted to shake things up a bit. And I wanted really to look a little bit more at mental health, particularly given menopause, as we know, it throws up a lot of mental health aspects, but also given COVID. And Jack is a health professional, and he's also a coach and a speaker with a focus and a passion for resilience and well-being. So, Jack, thanks for joining us today. It's lovely to chat to you, and I know I was certainly looking forward to our catch up.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. And hello to everybody that is on the listening end of the call.
Great, great. Yeah, I'm sure we'll get a good few people listening into this. I talk so much, Jack, about the physical symptoms of menopause, and I have obviously touched a lot on the mental and psychological. But what's lovely when I met you was I just thought, it's lovely to have a younger face, a fresh face for people to listen to, and also, we can learn a lot from the younger generation, and you're such a little baby at the age of 28. That it's kind of it's just it's lovely to have a fresh perspective. So before we kind of chat in general, do you want to just tell us a little bit about your own background and kind of how you've ended up in the role and the job that you're doing at the moment?
Absolutely. So I suppose coming through my teenage years, like all of you will remember, you're kind of questioning absolutely everything. And I questioned all sorts of things as you push out against the boundaries of your own comfort zone and your families and your parents and your teachers and your coaches and so on. And I questioned everything. And as I did question my body image and how I fit in and what I wanted to do and study and all of these kind of things, I sort of found my way towards this idea that I really cared about people. I was really good with people, and that was kind of a natural skill set from a young age. Um, and that I also had a real passion for like keeping people well and how do we get them well and how do we keep them well. And so
Mm.
I found myself heading off to study pharmacy in college. And first year was wonderful, and I suppose outside of my work life or academic endeavors, was really into physical activity. So particularly running, rugby, and my big passion at the time was windsurfing. And windsurfing was like
Yeah.
this all-consuming thing that I fell into, and I became a lifeguard, and I became an instructor, and so on, so that I could just spend my summers on the beach, basically
Bit like
instructing young people.
Baywatch in
And
Ireland, was it, Jack?
yeah, except I was like Casper going down the beach. I was so pale.
I love
um,
that.
it's funny. It's funny. In primary school, I got called milk bottle, and in then when I went instructing on the beaches, they called me Casper. So look,
Brilliant.
you have to you have to embrace yourself. Um, so Casper arrived down to the west of Ireland at the end of that first year in college, and I was going down there to spend the summer instructing, and this place was kind of a magic place to me. It was where I found my tribe. The people were wonderful. Like the only reasons you have to go down there is if you're interested in sort of outdoor pursuits in Balmullet.
Oh,
So
yeah.
you're right out on the west coast. If you're interested in outdoor pursuits, if you're going to an Irish college, And the third reason I always say is if you're going down to collect a shipment of drugs, because there's not a whole lot going down there.
Well, you know,
So
Jack, that's I'll tell you a funny story on that. We went to Belmullet during the summer for a week, and I was running. My
mm,
running group know this story. I was running on one of the beaches. It was like about 7:30 in the morning, and when I finished the run, there was this guy watching me, really strange. And he kept watching me. He was a much older man on his bike out for his morning cycle. And he kind of said, yeah, I'm watching you there now. What are you at? And I just said, oh, I've just been for a run. I just did there's a loop there in Belmullet, the park run route. And he said, Jesus, I thought maybe you were sending signals for a drug drop. Because I was doing yoga stretches, and he was trying to figure
oh
out what
God.
I was doing. So I totally get the Belmullet thing all right.
Yeah. Um, but like it's a magic place down there as well. Like it's just
Yeah.
beautiful, and you're just removed from everything. And so it was a very formative time for me down there. And I remember on one of the first days down there that summer, I cycled off to the beach by myself in the evening, and it's just this memory that's etched into my memory. And the scene is that as I look back down the beach, the only footprints in the sand are my own, and I'm sitting there looking over the waves as they break and the sun sets, and I just caught myself smiling. And I think everybody can remember a time when they catch themselves in the moment, and at that moment, like I just realized that for the first time, like I really remember, I was feeling quite comfortable with myself. I was happy with like a lot of the questions that I had answered, and I was like proud of the work that I'd put in to get where I was and excited about where I was going. And sort of things were lining up really nicely and for me at that time, and I really savored that. I recognized it and I
Mm.
savored it. And
And
only
Jack,
number
what age were you then?
so that was um I would have been 20 at that stage.
God,
So I
isn't that
was,
a very mature? Like that's a lovely way, at the age of 20 to be able to savor moments like that. Sometimes we can struggle at the age of 50, the age of 40, to kind of
yeah.
be able to do that.
And I suppose I would have been quite introspective at different times, very extroverted at times, um, but loved that kind of reflective nature. And so I really remembered that that was a moment that I savored. And we talk about savoring in positive psychology as a skill set, or in mindfulness as a skill set. Savoring those positive moments to help rewire the neuroplasticity in your brain and so on. But
Mm-hmm.
that's another piece. So a number of weeks later, at the end of that summer, I went away on holidays with some of my best friends. And on the first day of that holiday in Portugal, as I'd done so many times, I ran down the beach, dived into the water over a wave, and I didn't realize how shallow the water was. My head collided with the sandbank, and in that moment, I broke my neck. And you know, in an instant, the life that was just a moment before was just a memory, and so that was quite a stark moment in my life. And
Mm.
luckily, I was taken from the water before I drowned. A lot of things go through your mind, and time kind of slows down when you're face down in the water and you can't move. And the
Yeah.
irony was is that I was probably the best trained out of everybody as a lifeguard to deal with it.
Mm.
Um, but I woke up in intensive care the following morning with a metal cage around my head. I remember counting the 8 screws in the light above me, and I had tubes going in my nose and down my throat to keep me breathing and fed and alive. And um, a short while later, one of my best friends walked around the bed, and I was just greeted by Garrett's face, and he was like smiling but crying. And I couldn't speak, but I mouthed the words, "It's going to be okay." And I
Oh
don't really
God.
know where that
Yeah.
came from at the time, but it was like on some level acknowledging that like we will get through this. And
Mm.
I think a really stark thing to note is like mum and dad were flying over, not sure what they would arrive to really. And mum kept asking the question, why Jack? Like, why would this happen to
Yeah.
Jack? And dad asked the question back, and he said, well, why not Jack? Why should it have happened to anybody else on the beach? And that's a hard thing to hear, to for someone maybe to hear, but he's completely right. You know, um, like the reality is it happened,
Yeah.
and that couldn't be changed. And I asked the question too, like why me? And we all do, like shit hits the fan for all of us in different
Mm.
ways, be it in
Mm.
our professional lives, in our personal lives, be it financially, be it with a child getting sick, be it our own physical health or mental health, emotional health. It could be anything. Life throws us curveballs that we have
Yeah.
no idea are coming our way, and we ask the question, why me? And it's a natural response because that's part of the grieving process, you know. But after a certain period of time, you recognize as you come through that there's a gap there, and you can start to make choices, and you can
Mm.
say, well, why not me? And you know that is empowering, because
Yeah.
when you say why me, it's very much a victim scenario.
Yeah.
um and look, that is a safety, a safe place to be for a certain period of time. But at a certain point, with the support of others, and um with the foundations being laid again, we can start asking, well, why not me? And I think that's an excellent launch pad to move forward in a more constructive, empowered way.
Mm.
um it's a place from which you on some level have a level of acceptance or responsibility, and you kind of have to realize that, like, how I choose to look at this, or how I choose to respond,
Yeah.
um, that
Yeah.
actually they are things that I have control over. And the important thing to say is that in any time that you recognize the space to make that choice and you make it, that is not something that I did or any person does once.
Mm.
That happens day in, day out, maybe once, maybe 10 times, maybe 100 times. And the more that we recognize we have the choice in anything, you have a fight with your spouse, your neighbor is making noise again, or whatever it is, there's a space there. And in that space is our freedom to choose, as Viktor Frankl will say. Um, and in the response lies our freedom. So they were some of the things that I was thinking about over that time. And eventually I was flown back to Ireland. I nearly didn't make it, but I did, and ended up in rehab a few weeks later. And my first job was to learn to breathe without the aid of a ventilator, then to learn to reuse the 15% muscle function I had remaining. So my shoulders, my biceps, and wrists. And that was like, for a very active, fit, young 20-year-old, a lot
Mm.
to unbox and come to terms with. And um, physically, I was struggling, but it was also like a mental and an emotional. There was a lot going
I can
on,
imagine.
and
Yeah.
you have to ask yourself all sorts of questions all over again. And but in the years after that, within 13 months, I went back to college. Um, Heavily supported in college for the first year or two. Um, Barely barely getting through, and like physically, just so I back into that environment where I would be physically able to kind of bounce off things, and see what worked, and understand how can I minimize the impacts, or the additional bits and pieces that I need to do with the spinal cord injury to navigate the world, and in my day-to-day life. And that was a huge piece of it, and it was a hard course. So I just had to
Mm.
understand, well, how can I stay well, and how can I perform, and how can I do that on a continuous basis. And I think that's like what you call resilience. And
Mm.
our resilience wavers day to day depending on any number of things we can talk about. um But during those years, getting back to college and finishing my pharmacy degree, some wonderful opportunities and things happened along the way. And ultimately, it led me to a place where I'm more and more inspired by keeping people well and helping them to be
mm,
well. Um, Proactive health and health management is the only way forward,
yeah.
because the sick care model can't support itself on the long term.
Mm,
And you know, it's the little changes that we make day to day that keep us well, and that well-being is really about being well. Are you a well being?
mm,
And what are the things you can do mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually to set yourself up in that way, so that when the storms do come, you're more resilient and robust in those times.
mm. And
That's
I,
a whistle stop.
I mean, Jack, your story is pure resilience. Do you know? And it's kind of, I think, it's your story and your wisdom from what you've learned kind of it talks to everybody. It talks to us parents, it talks to children, it talks to anyone going through, as you say, a storm. And I always do try and say to women that I'm working with or that I'm talking to, it's like we all, life, as you said, we know it throws us curveballs. And so to me, how you look at things is so so important. Twinned with choices. We all have choices, and we all make our choices. And I think sometimes, like we were talking about before we recorded, you know our choices are whatever. There's no wrong choice, I don't think, within limits, obviously, that you don't hurt, maim, do something unkind or not nice to somebody. But for the most part, the choices that we make will all lead us somewhere. And I guess, I think it's bringing ourselves back to the moment, and being kind of being accountable and having the resilience, to be able to sit with the choices that we make are so important. And I think,
Yeah.
particularly obviously now in the world we're living with COVID, we're in a very different situation when it comes to resilience, and so forth. But like, if you think about it, for for that chapter in your life, for what you went through, I mean, that takes mountains of resilience, to navigate through something like that.
Well,
um
it in some ways it does, but I would just ask your listeners to put themselves, just for a moment, maybe if you're not driving, close your eyes and just think back to some of the hardest things that you faced in your life, and yet here you are.
mm, mm,
We have innate capacity um, for resilience and to get through, um, and I think that the resilience piece is like, can you face challenges and come back that little bit quicker? We talk about bounce back ability or bounce forward ability, and these kind of things, but really, like, at the moment, this is such a prolonged challenge that we're all facing: the COVID restrictions, the physical separation from each other. We're not socially isolated, but we're physically isolated.
mm.
I know that I'm crying out to give someone a hug.
Yeah, yeah.
These kind of things, and they're inhumane sort of things.
Mm.
um and yet here we all are. Something that you said a moment ago is like, the way that we look at things, the perspective that we look at things through is so important. And the framing and reference frame for anything that happens in life is key. And one of the things that I realized quite early on is perspective shapes reality. You know,
Yeah.
like we all, not one single person has enough awareness to see reality fully as it is.
Mm.
And that's a really hard thing to get your head around. And that there's just so much information out there, and yet our best effort is to sort of drop the judgments, drop the assumptions, and recognize as much as we can things are the way they are. And it's like, well, okay, taking things the way they are, it removes kind of false expectations. It removes the way we think things should be, the way we wish things were, the way things ought to be. And we actually look at the more closer to the reality of, well, this is as it is. And then you can choose your perspective to look at that from.
Mm.
Because the perspective is just the lens. If you think about your eyes or a mindset, it's the lens through which we choose to see things. And
Yeah, I love that,
prior
Jack.
to the
Yeah.
call, yeah, prior to the call, you mentioned about positivity, and um, you're a really positive guy, and I would say I'm to be honest, I'm just really a human being, and there's days when I'm very upbeat, and there's days when I struggle, and that's okay. You know, I'm human, and it took me a while to become okay with that because I got known as the resilient guy, and I was like, well, I have to be on form all the time. And I was actually, for me to be resilient, I need to have the low energy days, and I need to be okay with that and these kinds of things. What I do think is a really useful operating system, though, is to be, and this is learnable, is to be optimism with realism. So I call it being an optimistic realist.
Yeah,
The reason
that's
why that
good.
is
Yeah.
useful is that the reason why that's useful is that there's a thing called learned helplessness. And you know, it's that piece of us when we get knocked down once or twice, and we don't think we can do anything about it, and then we kind of just roll over and take the punishment, you know. And we think I'm destined to suffer forever.
Mm. That's like the woe's
It's the
me.
idea.
It's the woe's me attitude. Would you say it's like that?
Similar, and it's like things happen, and um you can think of like a challenging event that happens as like almost the first arrow that hits you, and then the second arrow is the story that we tell ourselves.
Mm.
And you know, and those arrows keep coming if we become sort of if we learn to be helpless and sort of let go of some of our choice. But what a beautiful thing is when you can flip the lens that you see that through, and you can recognize that actually I do have a level of choice about how I look at things.
Mm.
Events are just events, they're kind of neutral, you could almost say. um, I have a choice as to how I look at this. And then we come from a place of optimism with reality. And optimism isn't unbridled optimism. It's not saying that like everything will be absolutely perfect tomorrow. It's not saying that you know, I'm going to get up and walk out of this wheelchair next week. You know, the thing is, though, is okay, I'm optimistic that I can make progress and that I can have an influence on changing the trajectory of my life or my health, or I can pull the right people around me to support me during this time. And I know that ultimately I'll be okay, you know, whatever it might be. And the days that we can find it within ourselves to be more optimistic about things, in whilst facing reality, I think that's a really empowering place to be, and it's
Mm,
important to say that nobody is there every day.
yeah,
No,
yeah.
nobody's that way every
No,
day.
no,
But
no, yeah. Mm.
if you're there 51% of the time, you're moving in the right direction, you know?
Yeah, yeah, I mean, that's so powerful, Jack. God, I could listen to you all day. That is so powerful because you know what, particularly, for people who'll watch this, we all have our dark days. All of us. I do. You do. We all do. As you say, the low energy days, and that's life. I always kind of think. Like I was out early this morning and I went for a walk with the dog down the park and I always take my moments when I'm out in terms of I'm looking at the trees and whatever, and it's savoring the moments when all is well because it makes then those maybe hours or those days when maybe things look a little bit bleaker that that there are the chinks of light, that there, and that's what, like, if 51%, then you're definitely on the right trajectory. I know with menopause, particularly when, and I know you don't, you don't need to know too much about this, but what will help you is obviously, with your mom, with your sisters down the line, you'll understand their lives when it does happen. But with menopause, there is a huge amount of kind of mental emotional upheaval that happens, and it's kind of a bit like going through a storm. There's all this upheaval with the emotions, but then calm waters do ensue. But it's very important, for women when they're going through it, that they kind of understand the choices that they have, but also to understand that it's okay to have wobbly days. It's okay to have periods where you don't feel as strong or self-assured as you have done before. And, that's life too. It's not necessarily, part of it can be down to hormones and menopause, but it's life as well, right?
Mm,
So it's,
100%.
yeah.
Yeah, I I can't imagine. Like, I have such admiration for the women all around the world because what they go through on what all of you go through on a monthly basis, never mind the additional things that come with menopause, and childbirth, and all of those things. You know, it has to be incredibly challenging, and I can't
Mm,
put myself in that scenario. What I can say is what I can say is that we all go through those periods of questioning and
mm,
of being unsure, and as you said, of losing that sense of self assurance and our sense of self,
yeah.
and those times where we completely wobble and lose ourselves. And there's, if I'm very honest with you, I've gone through parts of that over even the last couple of months, where the way in which I was operating has completely changed, and it challenges your whole sense of identity, um, and so on. And I have very much had to come back and lean on the things that I do day to day to keep me well,
Mm,
and
mm,
the support systems that I've built around me. And I know you've mentioned a few times the support group that you have, environments like that when we're not feeling strong ourselves, that we have people to lean on, and
mm,
we pick each other up as we go. To have practices, you've mentioned your run and your walk with the dog and being in the park, all of these things, they're little things that add up, and they're easy not to do.
mm, mm, yeah.
And it's only over time when we notice that we're not doing them that we wonder, why am I so frazzled today? Why did I bite when I just needed to bark?
Yeah.
And and these kind of things. And there's a really nice analogy actually that I use with one of my own groups the other day, and it's pet the lizard, feed the mouse, hug the monkey. And
Pet the lizard, feed the mouse. Okay, talk.
Hug the monkey. Okay, so
Yeah.
um, the pet the lizard refers to the oldest part of our brain. Okay, so
Okay.
this
Yeah.
is
Um.
um, our lizard brain. So it's the
Yeah.
amygdala, it's the brain stem, it's those areas of the brain which are hyper reactive. They're much faster than our stronger frontal lobe, and they're basically designed to keep us safe. It's like when predator is coming your way, that's the part that kicks into fight or flight and gets the hell out of there. And the thing is if we're living in that space all day, um,
Mm,
we're upregulating our stress hormones. That influences everything from our gut to our mental
yeah.
state to our heart rhythms. Like, it takes blood from your central organs and pumps it to your extremities, like all these kind of things. And when we exist in that high stress state, it has like really maladaptive things for our physical and mental health, and regulation. And so, what are some things that you can do to pet the lizard? Well, simple things like um, box breathing, for example. So, breathing exercises that stimulate our parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest part. And so you can do that really easily by imagining that you're drawing a box with your breath. And so you breathe in for 4 seconds, that's one side of the box.
Hmm.
You hold for 4 seconds, that's another side. You breathe out for 4 seconds, that's another side. And the final side is you hold again. So it's in, hold, out, hold, in, hold, out, hold. And literally doing a minute of that, just actively concentrating on 1, 2, 3, 4, hold, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, is really powerful for centering you. Another thing that is really centering with the breath is to do to inhale and then do a longer exhale. And if you try and inhale, say for 3 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, and breathe out for five or six, that's really powerful because what it does is it stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system again. And those things are just such simple practices. If you think about the end of the day, when you're at the dinner table or you sit down on the couch and you let out the big sigh, it's like,
Yeah.
ah,
Yeah.
that's the long breath out. You're giving your
Mm,
body a sign that, wow, it's time to relax now.
yeah.
And you can give yourself that when you feel sort of stressed at different times through the day. Um, so that's like a little bit about how you can pet the lizard. Another way you can do it is when you catch yourself being really emotional or caught up in your thoughts, and highly activated, as we all find ourselves at times. You can literally say to yourself, thank you for trying to protect me, I'm okay now.
Okay. Yeah.
And like, it's just information, I'm okay
Mm,
now. So they're just a few little things. And the feed the mouse piece is the next most developed part for our brain. It's the neocortex, and it's really focused on like achievement, and pursuit of reward. And so we can give ourselves like little boosts of dopamine in lots of ways by actually just changing the way that we think about what we do. So in the morning, when you get up and you have your shower and you brush your teeth and you look in the mirror and smile at yourself because you're bloody awesome, and then you go in and make the bed, how many things have you already achieved?
mm,
you know and so if you flip the script and you say, yeah, I'm doing lots of really good things here. They're small things that add
mm,
up over time, but when you actually think about and appreciate yourself, importantly, for the little things that you're doing well, that
mm,
gives you sort of sense of competence and confidence for the bigger things that you'll want to do. um, and the final piece is hug the monkey. It's the frontal lobe, which is for executive functions like concentration and doing complex tasks. But really, what it's really, really good at is social dynamics. And so we're built for human connection.
mm.
And so like that's why the value of a support group like you're hosting, the value of a podcast like this where we feel, oh, it's not just me, I'm not so alone,
Yeah,
all of these kind of things are
yeah.
so important, where we have places to share both our highs and our lows. Like that's relationships, and cultivating our relationships. So
Mm.
they're just like, it's a simple little way to think about your
Yeah, it's
mind.
great. It's
um
great. I love that.
get delivered.
It's a great analogy. It's a brilliant analogy. And one thing like breathing, oh my God, like I always say that your breath is always with you, no matter where you are, it's always with you. So, utilizing it as much as we can, if you've panic attacks or just, you're feeling overwhelmed, it's always trying to go back to the breath, it's really important. So
It's
that's
the
great.
first, it's the first and the last thing that we do in life.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it must be
yeah.
important.
Yeah, very, very true. Very, very true. Well, Jack, listen, it was just fantastic to talk to you, and I could listen to you for hours. um, but you mentioned that you have groups or you do group work. Is that something people can get information on your website, or where can we get info on that?
Yeah, so generally, when I run programs, people then come into the groups afterwards to keep sort of a level of support.
Okay.
So there's not kind of a direct access immediately in,
Yeah.
but I do, if people keep in touch on the website or follow me on online, my handle is Jack Kavanagh IRL, and
Okay.
I'm sure you can find my
Yeah,
you can Google
I'll put
my
up the
name, Jack
links.
Kavanagh,
Yeah.
and you'll get the website and you can watch the documentary and different things.
Yeah, yeah, that's the documentary Breaking Boundaries that you did. Is that the one you mentioned, or you've
Yeah,
other?
yeah. So
Yeah,
so you'll be able to get all of those kind of things on the website and the podcast and so on,
yeah.
and just keep in touch there and you'll be able to find out more. I also do one-to-one coaching, so if that's something that you're interested in, please just feel free to reach out and drop me a line. I'd be delighted to work with you or your organization, and in terms of delivering well-being and resilience programs. So there are some of the things that I get up to.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, it was lovely to chat, Jack, and thanks a million for sharing your wisdom with us all. I know that I know many people within kind of my community will absolutely love this interview, just as I've done. So thanks a million, and we'll chat again soon, and hopefully at some point we can meet up in person when we return to
I know.
normality. Okay.
I know. So Catherine, I'll just say thank you so much for having
Yeah,
me, and
not
to
at all.
everybody that's
Absolute pleasure.
listening, stay well, everyone.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.